Hello and welcome to Creatively Rich. I am your host, Anne Tipton, here today with Amber Rochelle. For those of you who are new here, just a little bit about me. I am a financial coach. I help online business owners get their money handled and squared away so that everything is in place for them to live their rich life. So I am interviewing Amber today because she wants to tell us a little bit about the rich life that she has created for herself. And I'm super excited to hear her story. So Amber, I'm going to bring you on the broadcast, I believe.
Hi.
There you are. Hello. So welcome.
Having me on.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. So tell me a little bit about, you made a huge transition in your life. There was kind of some stuff that happened that you were like, I'm doing it on my own. So I want to hear all about that.
Yeah. So I was telling you when we talked the other day, so I was in corporate advertising for a really long time. That was like my longest career out of college. And, it was great. Like I made a really good living and everything, but it was really towards the end of it. I was super, super drained, really stressed out, really depressed. I just wasn't happy there. It was a pretty toxic environment, especially me being a highly sensitive person. It was really hard for me to be in that kind of competitive environment. And really, though, the bigger issue for me was that I had really been feeling called to do something that was more meaningful or felt more meaningful to me, particularly. And so I had started looking at going back to school to be a therapist. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't afford this. This is like too much. And that's when I stumbled across when I found the very first life coach that I had ever seen. And at that time, I didn't even know that was a thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is an actual job and people are making money at this. This is amazing. And the more research I did into it, the more it just really clicked for me that like, this is it. This is the thing. Like I'd never had that feeling before of like, oh my God, this is my path. But then came, how am I going to make this happen? So anyways, I'm researching life coach schools, online schools, trying to figure out what the next right step would be. And this is, I always, when I tell this story, I'm like, I cannot make this up. This actually happened. So I'm sitting at work one day and my friend and the office manager there, she came up to me and she was like, hey, you should meet the renters across the hall. And I was like, why do I care who's renting across the hall? And she's like, no, I just really think you would like this guy, Richard. So she walks me across the hall and introduces me to Richard. And he says, hi, I'm the director of the Seattle Life Coach Training School. So they basically moved in right across the hall from my advertising agency. And if that's not a total like hit over the head with the universe, I don't know what is. And so I ended up enrolling and going to school there. And that sort of started me on the path of really wanting to be an entrepreneur and to run my own business as a coach.
And so you had kind of a creative approach, which I really appreciate from a financial perspective. You knew that being a brand new life coach, just jumping out there into the waters and saying, I'm a life coach now, and still paying your bills. Sometimes people make that transition very hastily. So I really admire what you did there.
Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, there's something to be said for taking the leap and the net will catch you, but there's also something to be said for, being a little bit thoughtful and having a plan. Because if you just sort of go into it blindly, I mean, I came across roadblocks later on, but I wasn't in a place financially where I could just cut my corporate income and be like, okay, I'm starting a brand new business. So I sort of did them both simultaneously for a while, which was incredibly difficult because I was working all day. But what I really did was just focused on writing and blogging and putting information out there and just kind of creating some services if people wanted them. And so I was doing that for about a year and a half before I finally felt comfortable sort of stepping off on my own out of the corporate world.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that's the smartest way to do it. You see people get in these real financial binds when they just headfirst dive. And it's an easy and understandable thing to do, especially when it's a topic that you're super passionate about, which you obviously are. So,
sure.
So tell me a little bit about, you specialize in helping, I assume women. Do you help men as well?
I market myself as a coach for women. I would never turn a man away, ever. Like I have worked with men before, but my marketing is directed specifically at women. So
mine too. I feel you.
Yeah.
But it's towards highly sensitive people. So tell me a little bit about what that means to you and how you specialize in helping those folks.
Sure. Yeah. So for those watching that don't know, it's a little bit more of a popular topic these days. But if you don't know what a highly sensitive person is, it's basically a genetic trait. And I won't go into all the details because I'll be talking for an hour. But it is a genetic trait, and your brain is basically wired differently. So you essentially process data like anything that you take in, any sensory data. So what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're tasting, smelling, all of the senses, you take it in at a deeper level, and then you process it more thoroughly. So a lot of highly sensitive people struggle with feeling really overwhelmed, feeling really drained, feeling like they're picking up on everybody else's feelings and not knowing how to deal with that and separate their own from other people. We're basically like sponges. Like we just kind of, until we learn how to kind of protect ourselves, we just kind of absorb everything and then we chew on it for a really long time. And there's so many amazing benefits to being highly sensitive. But what I found through my own journey was that I was so caught up in dealing with the struggles and trying to overcome the hurdles that it brought into my life. And like a lot of people say, I felt like it was a curse back then. Now I see it as a superpower, but that took me a while to get from point A to point B. But the trick is really learning how to manage that side, learning how to manage the, some of the obstacles that can come with it. And then once you do that, then you start to see that it's a really cool thing, because HSPs are so empathetic and compassionate and smart and loving and kind, and they're really creative and imaginative and intuitive and visionary. And there's just so many incredible things that come along with having that gift. But it's really hard to access that when you're kind of stuck in the muck trying to tread through all of the challenges. So that's a lot of the work that I do with the women that I work with, is to help them set up their lifestyle in a way that supports being a sensitive person, because our society does not. Really, we're not set up that way. It's like, go, 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 everything's super, super fast. And that's really hard on us. Anybody, really, not just us sensitives, but particularly for sensitive women. So kind of locking down some of that lifestyle stuff, learning how to set better boundaries, how to protect your energy, lots more things. And then from that place, looking at like, now how can we explore how this is a gift and how you can use it to really give back to the world.
So let's back up one step, because when I first heard the highly sensitive, the HSP thing, I was like, oh, well, those people are weak. And it wasn't, and I mean, forgive me, but that was like that was my initial perception. And like, as I learned more and more about what it is like, oh, that's me. Like it took me a while, because I think the traits that we associate with being sensitive aren't necessarily what an HSP is. So how would somebody who maybe be on the fence or doesn't quite know if they would, qualify as an HSP, how might they distinguish themselves, or what should they look for?
I always tell people to go check out Elaine Aron. She is an author and a psychologist, and she actually coined the term the highly sensitive person. She was the one that did a lot of research on the brain science and found out that it was a genetic trait. She has a really amazing test on her website. I actually have a link to it on mine as well that helps you really identify, because there are things that you don't really think about when you hear that term. And so many people like yourself associate or did, at one point in time, like, oh, sensitive means weak, but then when you really start to dig into it, it's like, no, we're actually really, really incredibly strong people, because we're carrying this extra level of things that we have to deal with. We feel things at such a deep, deep level. It can be really hard to carry that weight. And we get up and go about our day and raise our kids and do our jobs just like everybody else, right? But also are kind of dealing with that extra layer that's really sort of invisible to the rest of the world. And so I always say, this is why I have the term the sensitive badass, because I'm like, we are totally badass. It's just that we need to see that for ourselves and accept that for ourselves to be able to start really like emulating that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, for me, I think the first thing that I recognized in myself as being a sensitive person was actually clothing. I'm super sensitive to fabrics and textures and how things feel on my skin.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, that's a trait of somebody who is highly sensitive. If I'm not in a breathable kind of cottony based fabric, I am itchy. It's like, no, that's part of it too. They're just these weird quirks.
Things that people would never think of, you startle easier because once again, sounds are louder for us, my husband will still come up behind me and I'll jump, and it's just part of who I am. And the physical aspect, and some people experience it more physically than others. It kind of depends. We all sort of have different levels of the elements of it that we experience, but there is some really universal traits to it, and particularly with the struggles that we have. And one of those big struggles is the fact that society really has in the past, labeled sensitives as weak. And so I think the more of us that start doing that work on ourselves and finding our own inner strength and then communicating that to the rest of the world and educating people on our trait, we can start to change the tide of that label, right? Because we need us. Like, we're really important in this world. And if we're stuck feeling like we're weak and we are too much and we're too sensitive, and we're too dramatic, and we're too this and that, then we can't really utilize the actual power of our gift.
Yeah. And it really took me aback that when I, again, heard the term HSP, I didn't think that I could be a type A personality, which I describe myself as a type A plus personality. I'm a little bit extra. And so but you can totally be an HSP and have that driven, go out there entrepreneurial spirit. They're
absolutely not. That's me.
Yeah.
Also, yeah. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that you're shy or that you're an introvert. Most HSPs are introverts, but that doesn't mean that all of us are. I used to be, now I consider myself an extroverted introvert. Like, I have qualities of both. I like being around people, but I have to have my alone time. So I kind of balance the two. But there's a lot of, I think, assumptions that people make when they hear that word. And it's like anybody else. It's a trait that we have, but we're all unique human beings. And then we have all of our other unique traits that kind of play into it. So
yeah. So you touched on one of the things that you help your clients with is the lifestyle stuff. So as a money coach, the lifestyle is the most important piece to me, because there's no point in having money if you don't have the lifestyle to accompany it. Right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about lifestyle as an HSP and how you can maximize what you've got going there.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to really take a step back from all the labels. Take a step back from what you hear in society, in the workplace, maybe even from your friends about how things are supposed to be. Like, if you can remove the supposed tos and the shoulds for just a second and really start to tune back in, because we're very outward focused. I always say we have little intuitive feelers, and they're just picking up all this information, and it's not always very natural for us to tune back in unless we kind of practice that muscle. But once you start to learn how to tune back in, to be like, well, what would feel good to me? And one of the questions that I always ask, because I think this really kind of sums it up, is what do you need every day to feel like your most optimal self? And for us, it's probably really different than people that might not have this trait, right? More downtime, more time to process, slower. It takes us longer to make decisions. We need to sort of digest things a little bit more. All sorts of things, and again, there's the stuff that's kind of common to all HSPs, and then just individually, what do you need in your life to feel like your most optimal self? For me personally, working from home has changed my life.
Me too. Seriously. Yeah. That's huge.
It's huge. And having a really solid morning practice for me is another thing, so that I can kind of ease into my day, start my day really connected to myself, so that, I'm coming out of the bat from that place, rather than going out into the world being inundated with everything and then trying to be like, wait, where am I in all of this and what do I need? But so it's really looking at kind of rituals and routines that are going to support you day in and day out, so that you can feel like your best self. And that's where I sort of start with people.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's wonderful. And finding those little rituals and pieces have helped me immensely in my life. And I'm totally with you on the working from home. That's the best thing. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So you are offering very generously a gift to one lucky listener here, or watcher, viewer of this podcast. So tell us a little bit about what you're offering and how, and we've got the link here posted to enter. So
Yeah. So I wanted to offer, a session with me, a 60-minute session with me, and I do them all over video, over Zoom, so we can see each other. I record it. You get the recording, which is really nice because you can just kind of be very focused in the session. Usually when people first come to me, sometimes they don't know what they need or what they want. And so I have you fill out a little survey first that's really helps you to be more introspective and helps me to come to the session just really prepped, so that we can, get you some results in that 60 minutes. And so I would love to offer that to anyone out there who is sensitive, and especially, if you are an entrepreneur, if you're just getting into that, if you're struggling with that, I can help you there too. So yeah, I would just love to support whoever ends up winning that.
Awesome. Well, to go ahead to enter, click the link that's here, and then you can follow myself, and you can follow Amber if you haven't already, on all of our various social media channels, and everyone that you follow gives you another entry into the contest to win an amazing session with Amber. So thank you so much for being on today and helping educate us a little bit about the world of the HSPs. I know that there's a lot to dig into there. And for me, it's a fascinating topic, especially because it resonates personally. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Thanks, Amber. Bye.
Bye, everyone.